Hey folks, today on Soft Plastics 101 we're going to talk to you about the anatomy of a jig head. So before we get into more complex rigging, let's have a look at what makes up a jig head. So when we're soft plastics fishing, 90% of the time for a lot of us in general estuary, creek, freshwater fishing, we'll use a standard style of jig head. And you can keep it as simple or you can make it as complex as you want, but if you're first getting into soft plastics, it doesn't differ greatly from bait fishing in terms of the components that make up our rig. So we still have a hook on our jig head, the same as we have a hook for bait fishing, and we need to make sure that we select a hook that's suitable for both the species we're targeting and also for the bait, in this case the soft plastic, that we're putting onto that hook as well. We still have our sinker. So our sinker is our head weight on our jig head. So our head weight allows us casting distance, and it also allows us to sink that plastic to the desired depth. And our hook makeup is fairly similar. We have an eye of a hook where we attach our line. We have the shank of the hook, the bend of the hook, the barb under here, which is the reverse point that pins that fish and holds that fish onto that jig head. And we also have a hook point. So TT jig heads, generally black nickel chemically sharpened hooks. So you'll find that that's a super sticky point, but it's also nice and strong, so you'll get a lot of fish out of that jig head generally. Some people do squash that barb if they're sports fishing or they're going remote fishing, where there's a chance if they do get the hook into themselves, it could be difficult to get out. So they'll actually squash that barb to make hook removal a bit easier. So that's our standard jig head. The other feature on here is the grub keeper. And that grub keeper is designed to keep our grub, keep our soft plastic on the jig head and lock it in place. So you'll find some jig heads have that grub keeper pushed up against the head. It's like molded as one piece. But when we're using the 10 times tough Z-Man super soft and flexible plastics, we've designed this jig head to lock them on more effectively. So when you push that soft plastic on, it actually goes up and over that grub keeper and it locks into that gap between the grub keeper and the jig head. Also suitable for all other brands of soft plastics as well. So that's the standard jig head. So you can see it in my hand there, and then you can see it there rigged on a soft plastic. So the hook's actually fed through the soft plastic nice and straight, and then it comes out of the back of the soft plastic there. And you can see possibly a difference in the hooks there. You may not pick it up on camera, but that's actually a heavy wire and a light wire hook. So you can get the same weight, same hook size, and you might get a fine wire hook, which is all about penetration on a light line, and with light leaders if you're chasing brim and those sorts of critters that take a bit of hook set, especially when you're fishing light line, you want that finer hook. And then the heavier hook like the Headlocks HD heavy wire, ideal for snapper and those heavier fish where you're fishing heavier drags, heavier line, and you really want to set that hook. So that's a standard jig head and the anatomy of a standard jig head. I'll have a look at a couple of quick variances in the jig head. So this is a hidden weight system, and we'll go into more detail on how to rig and fish those down the track. But you can see that one there, the grub keeper is actually also the weight of the jig head, and that's hidden inside the plastic. So very, very good for ness fishing. The fish can't really see that weight or anything. All they see is the hook, boom, fish on, away they go. They're just really focusing on that plastic. So that's a hidden weight system, and we'll talk about that in more detail later on. But if you see that when you're looking at jig heads, that's what that's about. Conceals the lead weight inside the plastic, so it's a very natural presentation and a really nice slow sink for fishing around pontoons and jetties and things. The other one that you may come across is a weedless style of hook for those that are fishing weed and fishing snags. And the anatomy is quite similar in a sense that you've still got your head weight, you've still got your grub keeper, but it's in the form of a chin lock on this hook, but the hook's a different shape and it's got a belly on the hook, and that's because our plastic actually sits in underneath the barb of the hook and the point of the hook, and that allows you to run it through timber and weed without it snagging or fouling as easily. So that's a weedless jig head, and on here our attachment point is the eye of the hook. On here we've actually got a head weight attached so that we can get that down in the water, and we attach our line to that point there. So that's a weedless style of jig head, and you'll see that by the curved shape hook. This one has a belly weight on it as well. So there you go. When you go in and have a look at jig heads, you're probably going to be fishing straight up just with a standard jig head if you're fishing open country weed, general light weed and sandbanks and offshore and those sorts of things. So your head weight will vary and your hook size will vary, but it's generally a standard jig head in either that Headlocks Finesse, which is the light wire, or that HD, which is the heavy wire hook. So there you go, that's the basic anatomy of a jig head. Hope that helps you get started on your soft plastics fishing. Cheers.